Dr. Liam Carter stood at the podium, the weight of 1,000 skeptical eyes pressing down on him. The International Scientific Conference was filled with minds far more experienced and established than his own. But here he was, presenting his life's work, the culmination of years spent toiling in obscurity. His voice echoed in the grand hall, steady despite the doubt that had already crept into his mind. Seventh-dimensional space, he began, gesturing to the holographic projection floating beside him, a complex mesh of geometry twisting and turning in ways that seemed almost impossible. A realm beyond the known, a dimension where time and space bend in ways that we, as a species, have barely begun to understand. Humanity's greatest challenge is not in crossing vast distances, it's in transcending the limitations of the very space we inhabit. The audience was quiet, but Liam could feel their disbelief like a physical presence in the room. He wasn't new to rejection. In fact, he'd been met with far worse than skepticism, dismissal, mockery, and ridicule. But still he pressed on, his passion undeterred. The very concept of seventh-dimensional travel is one that stretches the limits of our understanding. But the theories are sound, Liam continued, his hands trembling slightly as he manipulated the holograms, showing complex equations, hyperbolic shapes, and impossible angles. If we can stabilize the energies inherent in this space, we can create a vessel capable of crossing it, opening up entirely new realms of exploration. The silence in the room was deafening. His colleagues exchanged glances, whispering behind their hands. Some rolled their eyes. Liam could feel their judgment. To them, he was just another idealist, a dreamer with no grasp of reality. But he wasn't deterred. His mind raced with possibilities. You've all seen the theories proposed by the likes of Einstein, Hawking, and others, Liam continued. We've been limited by what we can perceive. But what if there are dimensions beyond our understanding? What if there's a place where our conventional laws of physics break down entirely? The seventh dimension might hold the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. A hand shot up from the back of the room. Dr. Marcus Harlow, a renowned astrophysicist and one of the most respected names in the field, smirked as he spoke. Dr. Carter, are you suggesting that humanity, with our primitive technology and limited understanding, could actually transcend the 4 dimensions we know? You're seriously asking us to believe that we can leap into a realm that no species has ever entered? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Liam took a deep breath. Yes, he said, his voice unwavering. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. I believe it's not only possible but within our grasp. The laughter that followed felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the kind of laughter that was meant to be funny. It was the kind that stung, the kind that said, "You're an idiot and we're humoring you." Liam's heart sank, but his resolve hardened. He was used to this. After all, he had been told countless times that humanity was too young, too insignificant, too far behind the rest of the galaxy. The Galactic Union, the collection of alien civilizations that oversaw galactic affairs, had already labeled Earth a minor player in the grand scheme of the universe. Humans were not seen as a threat, nor were they regarded as valuable contributors to scientific knowledge. They were a curiosity, nothing more. And now, as the whispers of his audacious project spread, the Union had taken notice. That was precisely why they needed to be shown otherwise. The conference continued, but Liam's words fell on deaf ears. His presentation was met with more ridicule, more dismissive gestures. His theories, though groundbreaking, were considered too radical, too outlandish to be taken seriously. After all, how could a species that still struggled to grasp the fundamental principles of space travel begin to comprehend the mysteries of higher dimensional physics? But Liam wasn't ready to give up. He had devoted his life to this project, to proving that humanity was capable of more than anyone thought possible. It wasn't just about the science. It was about pride, about showing the universe that humanity had something to offer beyond its supposed weakness. The galaxy had ignored them for far too long, but Liam would change that. The day's events faded into the night, and Liam found himself back in his lab, staring at the holographic model of the 7th-dimensional vessel that would change everything. It had taken years of work, countless hours of research, design, and failure. But now, with all the setbacks, the sabotage, and the ridicule, he had to keep going. There was too much at stake. As the clock ticked past midnight, Liam continued his work in silence, lost in the hum of machinery and the rhythm of calculations. The lab was dim, the only light coming from the glowing screens and the soft blue hue of the holograms. It was during these late hours, when the world around him was still, that his thoughts became clear. His doubts faded, replaced by a quiet determination. This project wasn't just about proving himself to the world, it was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. Suddenly, a soft beep interrupted his focus. A new message had appeared on his encrypted channel. It was a transmission, but not from Earth. The source was alien, an encryption pattern far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. Liam's heart raced as he opened the message. The text was brief and cryptic, written in a language that was clearly not human but somehow familiar. "You are on the right path, Dr. Carter, but your vessel needs one last key to succeed. I can help you, but the path will not be easy. Prepare yourself." Liam stared at the message, his mind racing. It could have been a hoax, but there was something in the words that felt different, something he couldn't explain. His instincts told him that this was no random transmission. Something, was watching him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe this project wasn't just a pipe dream. Maybe it was humanity's ticket to proving their worth. He had no idea who had sent the message, but he knew one thing. His journey was about to get a whole lot more complicated, and that, he realized, was exactly what he needed. With a deep breath, Liam set to work. This time, failure was no longer an option. The first cracks in Dr. Liam Carter's resolve came swiftly. The project, which had started as a passionate pursuit of scientific discovery, was quickly becoming an exhausting race against time. The message from the mysterious alien transmission had filled him with a renewed sense of purpose, but it also brought a new wave of challenges. The vessels, equipment, and materials required to make the 7th-Dimensional ship a reality were beyond anything Earth could provide. As much as humanity had advanced, it wasn't enough, not yet. Liam had always known that funding would be a problem. The world wasn't ready to back something as radical as dimensional travel. But this was different. This was bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. The more he dug into the project, the clearer it became that the obstacles were not just scientific but political, and far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. His first course of action was to secure the necessary resources. His primary laboratory, once located in a sleek scientific complex in downtown Washington, had been relocated. The higher-ups, those who could control the flow of funds, weren't willing to pour their resources into a project that had no proven return. So, he moved everything. He set up in an old abandoned military facility tucked away in the mountains of Colorado, far from prying eyes. Liam knew the Galactic Union was watching. As much as the higher-ups in Earth's government had dismissed his work, the truth was that humans had never been fully out of the Union's radar. No one said it aloud, but they knew. They knew that one day humanity might stumble across something that was more than the galactic community could handle. But he hadn't been prepared for what came next. Liam worked in silence, surrounded by the echo of rusted machines and the buzz of experimental technology. His team had been slimmed down to just a few trusted engineers and astrophysicists, all of whom believed in him. If not in the project itself, then at least in him as a person. Together they worked relentlessly, but soon it became clear that alien sabotage wasn't just a threat. It had begun. It started with the materials. Rare and exotic metals needed to create the vessel's core were being mysteriously rerouted to different suppliers. Liam would place an order, only to find the shipments diverted, delayed, or lost entirely. His team tried to cover up the missing parts, but it was becoming harder to hide the truth. Everything was getting more difficult, more expensive, and more uncertain by the day. Weeks passed, and each day brought a new form of sabotage. The shipments of crucial components disappeared without a trace. Systems designed to protect his facility from external breaches began malfunctioning. What had once been a quiet military base in the mountains now felt like a war zone. Constant false alarms, half-mended fences, and never-ending repairs. But it wasn't just the physical damage that made Liam uneasy. It was the nagging suspicion that someone, or something, was actively trying to shut him down. His paranoia grew, and he found himself looking over his shoulder at every turn. Then, it happened. In the dead of night, when the lab's security systems were on their lowest alert, the enemy made their move. A team of covert operatives dressed in black suits and equipped with high-tech weaponry stormed the facility. They came through the walls, hacking into the security cameras before most of Liam's team could even react. Liam had just enough time to scramble for cover, watching through the cracked lens of a monitor as the invaders moved through the facility. They destroyed the equipment, overturned the workstations, and scattered the precious research documents. The attackers were professionals, not here to steal, but to obliterate everything. As they passed by his lab, Liam held his breath, praying they wouldn't find him. His heart raced in his chest as the attackers advanced down the hall. There was no time to think, No time to plan. He had to act. He grabbed a power tool from the workbench and, with a sharp breath, burst out of his hiding spot, catching the nearest intruder off guard. A quick series of movements and the intruder was on the ground, knocked out cold. But as Liam reached for the next tool, a sharp, searing pain shot through his side. The enemy had backup. A blast from an energy weapon struck him in the ribs, sending him flying backward into a row of shattered equipment. Pain bloomed across his body as his vision blurred. He couldn't move, couldn't think. He had come so far only to be stopped here, in a facility meant to hide from prying eyes. The attackers were closing in, preparing to finish what they had started. But then something remarkable happened. One of the intruders stopped. She paused, turning to Liam with a look that didn't belong in this chaotic scene. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by something else, something Liam couldn't place. She was different, not like the others. The uniform she wore wasn't standard Galactic Union military. It was far more intricate, designed for a different kind of soldier. With a deliberate motion, she raised her weapon to Liam's head, but her finger hesitated on the trigger. She spoke in a language Liam didn't understand, but the tone was familiar, urgent, almost pleading. "Help us," she said in perfect English, the words cutting through the haze of pain in Liam's mind. "They know you're close. Don't stop. You can't stop." Before Liam could respond, the woman quickly pressed a small device into his palm and disappeared into the shadows. The sound of her footsteps was drowned out by the whirring of machinery as she escaped, leaving him alone with the wreckage. When he came to, he found himself back at the lab, his body aching but alive. The attackers were gone, the damage was irreversible, and his team was on high alert, trying to clean up the mess. But the device the mysterious woman left him with, it was still there, nestled in his hand. Liam stared at it for a long time, the weight of its significance sinking in. The woman had meant it for him. She had been part of something far larger, and now she had trusted him with a piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just sabotage, it was a warning. Whoever had been targeting him wasn't finished, but there was no turning back now. That night, Liam worked furiously, scanning the device. It contained a series of complex algorithms, ones he had never seen before, a blueprint for the next phase of his project, a way to stabilize the 7th-Dimensional gateway. The renegade alien, whoever she was, had helped him in ways he couldn't understand. Yet, in the quiet hours before dawn, he understood one thing. The Galactic Union had already decided. They knew what was coming, and they would stop at nothing to keep humanity from achieving the impossible. But Liam wasn't about to stop. Not now. The tension had been simmering for weeks, but now it was about to boil over. The Galactic Union had taken notice of Liam's project in earnest, and they weren't willing to let him continue unhindered. The attack on his lab had made it clear. This wasn't just about bureaucratic sabotage or missing shipments anymore. It was a direct, violent intervention. Liam was back in his lab, surrounded by the remnants of the attack. His colleagues were working frantically to repair what they could, but the damage was significant. The ceiling had collapsed in several areas, vital equipment had been smashed to pieces, and the central computational hub, a key component to processing the immense calculations needed for 7th-dimensional travel, was fried beyond repair. They were fighting against time now, and it was a fight they were losing. It didn't help that Liam's mind kept drifting back to the mysterious woman, her face flashing before his eyes as he tried to concentrate. The words she'd spoken, the urgency in her voice, it all pointed to something bigger, something he couldn't quite grasp yet. She'd said that he couldn't stop, that they were close. Close to what exactly? And who was they? But whatever doubts he had, the time for contemplation had ended. Alarms blared through the facility, a shrill cry that sent his team scrambling. Liam looked up at the monitors and his heart sank. A fleet of alien ships hung in Earth's orbit, silhouetted against the dark backdrop of space. Their sleek, angular designs gleamed in the dim light, casting an ominous shadow over everything below. It wasn't just one or two vessels. It was a full blockade, and it was headed directly for his remote facility. Liam's communication console flickered to life, and a face appeared, a reptilian figure with scales the color of burnished copper, eyes glowing with a cold, indifferent light. The Galactic Union had sent one of their enforcers. "Humans of Earth," the voice crackled, smooth yet edged with malice. "This is Commander Zyril of the Galactic Union Enforcement Fleet. You have been found in violation of intergalactic technological sanctions. Cease all research on 7th-dimensional technology immediately, or face the consequences." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. Sanctions? He wasn't even aware that such sanctions existed for 7th-dimensional technology. But then, that was the point. wasn't it? The Union had never bothered to inform humanity of the limits they were under, because they never thought Earth would come close to breaching them. His fingers moved over the console, transmitting a reply. His voice was steady, even as fear twisted in his gut. Commander Zyril, I am Dr. Liam Carter. We are conducting peaceful research. We have no intention of using this technology as a weapon. I ask that you reconsider your stance. Zyril's mouth curled into something resembling a smile, but there was no humor in it. Humanity's intent is irrelevant. The technology you are developing is a threat to galactic stability. You will comply, or you will be eradicated. The transmission cut off, leaving Liam staring at the blank screen. His team was looking at him, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Liam took a deep breath, his mind racing. They were outmatched. This was no longer a simple project. They were standing on the precipice of war. Grace, he called out, his voice carrying across the ruined lab. Get me everything we have on the ship's defensive systems. If they're here to wipe us out, we're not going down without a fight. Dr. Grace Liu, his closest confidant and second in command, nodded, her fingers flying over her tablet. Liam, we don't have much left, she said, her voice tight, but there's a chance we could use the dimensional core to create a short burst, a jump to displace the lab, move us out of their immediate targeting zone. Liam nodded, considering. A jump like that was risky. The core was still in its experimental stage, and using it to shift an entire facility was leagues beyond anything they'd tested. But with the fleet bearing down on them, it was either that or stay put and be obliterated. All right, Liam said. Everyone, listen up. We're about to do something insane. We're going to attempt a micro-jump. It's going to be rough and it's going to be dangerous, but it's our only shot. Get everything secured. Now. The lab became a hive of activity. Cables were rerouted. Machinery bolted down. Calculations run and rerun. Liam and Grace worked side by side, feeding the core the coordinates for the jump. Sweat dripped down Liam's face as he stared at the data. If this failed, they wouldn't just lose the lab. They could tear a hole in the very fabric of space-time. The Galactic Union fleet above began to power their weapons, the energy readings spiking on the lab's sensors. The countdown had begun. Liam could almost feel the pulse of the ship's weapons, each one aimed at his fragile facility. The lights flickered, the hum of the core growing louder and louder, a high-pitched whine that seemed to shake the very air around them. "Ready!" Grace shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar. Liam slammed his hand on the activation pad. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. Time seemed to stand still, and then the world exploded into light and sound. The facility shuddered, the walls vibrating as the dimensional core activated. A flash of blue-white energy enveloped the lab, and Liam felt himself pulled in every direction at once, his vision blurring as reality twisted around him. He clung to the console, his knuckles white, his heart pounding, and just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The facility lurched, the light fading, and everything went still. Liam opened his eyes, his ears ringing, his body aching. The monitors flickered back to life, showing a new landscape, still in the mountains but far from the original site. They had done it. They had escaped the immediate attack. The sense of relief was short-lived. The monitors also showed the Galactic Union ships, now searching the area where the lab had been. It wouldn't take them long to find the new location. They had bought themselves time, but not much. Liam took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to his team. They were exhausted, but there was determination in their eyes. They had faced death and they had survived, but the threat wasn't over yet. He turned to Grace, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to get the vessel operational. The Galactic Union isn't going to stop until they've wiped us out. We have to show them that we won't be silenced." Grace nodded, her eyes fierce. "What's the plan, Liam?" Liam looked at the holographic model of the 7th-Dimensional vessel, still glowing softly despite the destruction around them. The only way to prove humanity's worth, to show that they could not be crushed, was to activate the vessel, to take the leap that no one else had dared to take. "We finish the ship," he said, his voice firm. "We launch it, and we show them exactly what humanity is capable of. If they want to treat us like a threat, then we'll give them something to fear." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling over them. Then, one by one, his team nodded. They had come this far. They weren't about to back down now. Liam turned back to the console, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The Galactic Union wanted to silence them, to keep humanity from achieving greatness, but they had underestimated one thing: humanity's resilience. This was far from over, and Liam was ready to fight no matter the cost. The moment had come. There was no more time to wait, to prepare, or to second guess. Dr. Liam Carter stood before the 7th-Dimensional vessel, the culmination of years of work, countless sacrifices, and a relentless drive to prove that humanity could achieve the impossible. Around him, his team moved with determination, their exhaustion barely held at bay by sheer willpower. The Galactic Union's fleet was getting closer with every passing hour, and they all knew it was now or never. The vessel itself stood at the center of the lab, a sleek, angular craft that seemed almost alien, shimmering under the bright lights. Its surfaces were lined with intricate energy conduits, pulsing softly with an otherworldly blue light. The core of the vessel, the heart of the ship that would propel them into the unknown, thrummed with energy, ready to do what no other machine had done before. Liam took a deep breath, his eyes tracing over every curve of the ship. He'd built it with his own hands, alongside the brilliant minds who believed in him. He looked over to Grace, who was standing by the core console, her eyes meeting his. There was fear there, but also something else. Hope. They had come so far. There was no turning back. "Everything's set, Liam," Grace said, her voice carrying across the room. "The core is stable, power levels are nominal. It's now or never." Liam nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He approached the vessel, running his hand along its cold surface. This was it. Everything they had worked for, everything they had suffered through, led to this moment. He turned back to his team, their eyes watching him with a mix of apprehension and trust. "I know we're scared," he said, his voice loud enough to be heard over the low hum of machinery. "I know the odds are against us, but this ship represents everything we are as humans. Our spirit, our desire to explore, to understand, to prove that we belong. They want to silence us because they fear what we might become. But today, we show them that we're more than what they think." His words hung in the air, the room filled with a charged silence. Then, with a nod, Liam climbed into the cockpit of the vessel, the hatch ceiling shut behind him. The interior was tight, filled with displays, switches, and controls. He adjusted the harness over his shoulders, his fingers dancing over the console as he began the startup sequence. "Core alignment stable," Grace's voice echoed through the vessel's communication system. "Dimensional pathways are opening. Liam, remember, once you engage the core, you're committed. There's no stopping until you're either through or you're not." Liam smiled grimly, his eyes focused on the displays before him. "I know, Grace, we've come this far. Let's finish it." The vessel shuddered as the core activated, the soft blue glow intensifying until it filled the entire cockpit. The air seemed to hum with energy, the pressure mounting as the dimensional gateway began to open. Outside, the lab's walls seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was bending, stretching to accommodate the impossible. Liam gripped the controls tightly. The data on his screen shifted, the numbers and graphs spiking wildly. The gateway was almost open. He could feel it, like a pull deep inside his chest. It was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, a sensation that defied description. The boundary between dimensions was thinning, and soon he would be the first to cross it. But just as the vessel began to lift, the alarm systems blared throughout the facility. Liam's comm crackled, and Grace's voice came through, panicked and urgent. "Liam, they're here. The fleet found us." Liam glanced at the external feed, his eyes widening at the sight of alien warships descending through the atmosphere. There were dozens of them, their weapons already charging, aimed directly at his lab. Time was up. He gritted his teeth, his heart pounding. This was it. He had to make the jump now, or everything would be lost. His hands flew across the console, making rapid adjustments. The core's energy readings spiked, the vessel vibrating as it prepared to pierce the dimensional barrier. "Liam, the window is closing." Grace's voice was frantic now, barely audible over the roaring alarms. "You have to go now." He took a deep breath, focusing on the readouts, the data that was streaming past faster than he could fully comprehend. There was no time to think, only to act. He reached forward, his fingers closing around the activation lever. "Engaging core," he said, his voice barely a whisper, and he pulled the lever. The effect was instantaneous. The vessel was enveloped in a brilliant flash of light, and the world outside seemed to vanish. Space folded around him, the familiar view of his lab replaced by a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, impossible geometries twisting and shifting as he hurtled into the 7th dimension. The sensation was overwhelming. He felt as though his body was being pulled apart and pushed together at the same time, the laws of physics breaking down as the vessel pushed further and further into the unknown. His vision blurred, the colors around him shifting, fracturing, until he could barely tell up from down, forward from back. He was surrounded by something vast, something ancient, a space that wasn't really a space at all. Liam fought to keep his focus, his eyes glued to the control panel. The core was holding, but barely. The energy output was fluctuating wildly, the ship struggling to maintain its integrity in the chaotic environment. He had to stabilize it, had to keep pushing forward. Suddenly, a shockwave rippled through the vessel, throwing him against the harness. Red warning lights flashed across the console, the ship's systems screaming as it fought to hold together. Something was wrong. He was caught in a dimensional rift, a pocket of instability that was tearing at the vessel's structure. No, 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 Liam muttered, his fingers flying over the controls, trying to compensate. The vessel shuddered violently, the metal groaning under the strain. He could feel the rift pulling at him, trying to drag the vessel off course, to swallow him whole. He wasn't going to let that happen, not after everything they had sacrificed to get here. Liam activated the ship's stabilizers, the energy output spiking as he fought against the rift's pull. The ship lurched, the vibrations intensifying, and for a moment, he thought he was lost. But then, slowly, the rift began to recede. The vessel steadied, the chaotic swirl of colors around him beginning to calm. The readout stabilized, the core's energy levels leveling off. He had done it. He had passed through the instability. And now, the ship was in a stable pocket of 7th-dimensional space. The view outside the cockpit was like nothing he had ever seen. A vast, endless expanse of shimmering light and shadow, twisting and shifting in ways that defied comprehension. Liam took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had crossed into the 7th dimension, something that no one, not human, not alien, had ever achieved. The realization hit him like a wave, a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had been right. This place, this dimension, was unlike anything in their universe. But there was no time to dwell on the wonder of it. He had to get back. The vessel was holding, but it wouldn't last forever. He adjusted the controls, setting the ship for a return jump. The core thrummed, the energy building once again. "Liam, are you there?" Grace's voice came through the comm, faint but audible. He smiled, his heart lifting at the sound. "I'm here, Grace. I made it. It works." The cheer that erupted on the other end of the line was deafening, filled with relief and triumph. Liam's eyes stung, emotion welling up inside him. They had done it. They had proven that humanity was capable of greatness, that they were not to be dismissed or ignored. He took one last look at the shimmering expanse around him, the beauty of the 7th dimension etched in his memory forever. Then, with a deep breath, he engaged the return sequence, the vessel vibrating as it prepared to make the jump back to their reality. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first step into the unknown, and Liam knew that they would never stop exploring. They would never stop reaching for more. With a final flash of light, the vessel vanished from the 7th dimension, hurtling back towards Earth, towards home. Liam felt the familiar pull of gravity as the 7th-dimensional vessel exited the higher realm and re-entered Earth's atmosphere. The sensation was like waking from a deep dream, coming back into focus as the vessel vibrated violently, the ship's systems struggling to adjust to the sudden change in dimensional physics. The cockpit was filled with alarms, red lights flashing, warning of systems overloading. Liam's hands flew over the controls, instinctively making adjustments to stabilize the descent. The atmosphere roared around him as the vessel plummeted through thick layers of cloud. The heat shield glowed a bright orange and the cabin shuddered under the pressure. But the ship held together. The core remained intact, and slowly the vibrations eased, and the roaring outside began to diminish. Liam could see the Earth stretching out below, a brilliant blue and green orb scattered with swirling white clouds. He couldn't help but smile. He had made it. He was back. The vessel adjusted, its thrusters kicking in to slow the descent, and Liam aimed for a remote landing site, far from any prying eyes. The lab's previous site had already been discovered by the Galactic Union, and Liam couldn't risk being intercepted upon landing. With a heavy thud, the vessel finally made contact with the ground, the dust swirling around it as it settled. He released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his muscles loosening. They had done it. The first journey to the 7th dimension had succeeded, and humanity had crossed a threshold that no one had thought possible. As he unbuckled the harness and climbed out of the cockpit, Liam could see the small team he had entrusted waiting for him at the edge of the makeshift landing site. Grace was the first to reach him, her eyes wide with disbelief, tears glistening on her cheeks. She looked at him for a long moment, then threw her arms around him. "You did it, Liam. You actually did it." He hugged her back, the emotions rushing through him in a wave. The fear, the exhaustion, the relief, they were all there, bubbling up to the surface. He had taken the leap, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in humanity's potential. And here he was, standing on solid ground, proof that what they had imagined was possible. One by one, the rest of his team joined in the cheer, their faces beaming with pride and awe. Even the most cynical among them couldn't hide the spark of excitement in their eyes. They had been through so much: sabotage, threats, attacks, and now they stood together, victorious. Grace pulled away, her smile faltering for just a moment as her gaze shifted to the horizon. "We don't have much time, Liam. The Union will be back. They know we're up to something, and now they have a reason to be afraid." Liam nodded, his gaze growing serious. He knew she was right. The Galactic Union wouldn't let this slide. They'd tried everything to stop him, from bureaucratic sabotage to direct assaults, and now that they knew he had succeeded, they would escalate. Earth had gone from an insignificant blip on their radar to a potential threat, a wild card that could disrupt the established order. But for all the fear that brought, Liam felt a surge of defiance. This wasn't just about showing off humanity's scientific prowess. It was about showing that they could stand on their own, that they were not to be overlooked or dismissed. He turned to the team, his voice steady. "Listen, everyone," he began, his eyes scanning the faces of those who had stood by him through everything. "We've just done something that no other species has ever done. We've opened the door to the 7th dimension, something that even the Galactic Union couldn't accomplish. They see us as a threat because they're afraid of what we represent. Change." He paused, his words hanging in the air. "But we're not here to wage war. We're here to prove that humanity is capable of greatness, that we can be more than what they think. Today, we showed them that they can't control our future, and if they want to challenge that, well, they'll find out just how strong we can be." The crowd around him cheered, their voices echoing across the empty landing site. It wasn't just the cheer of victory, it was the sound of people who had faced the unknown and emerged triumphant, ready for whatever came next. Grace stepped forward, her voice low so only Liam could hear. "What's the next move? We can't stay hidden forever. They'll find us eventually, and we don't have the resources to keep running." Liam looked back at the vessel, its surface scarred from the journey but still intact. He knew she was right. The Union had the advantage. They had numbers, technology, and power, but humanity had something they didn't understand yet: resilience, creativity, and the will to fight for something greater than themselves. "We need to show them that we're not the enemy," Liam said after a moment. "We're going to contact the renegades. Whoever sent me that message, they're out there, and they know more about the Union's weaknesses than we do. We'll need allies if we're going to keep moving forward." Grace raised an eyebrow. "The renegades? You think they'll help us?" Liam smiled faintly, his eyes distant. "They already did. That woman, the one who left the device, she knew we were on the right path. She risked everything to get us what we needed. If there are more like her, then maybe we have a chance. Maybe we can find a way to make the Union see that we're not a threat, unless they force us to be." The wind swept through the landing site, the dust swirling around them, and Liam felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The future was uncertain. He knew that. The Galactic Union would come for them and the road ahead would be full of danger, but they weren't alone. They had each other, and they had the drive to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. He turned to his team, the people who had stood by him through everything, who had believed when no one else had. "Get the vessel secure. We'll need to run diagnostics. Make sure it's ready for another jump if we need it. Grace, start scanning for any trace of that renegade transmission. If they're out there, we need to find them." Grace nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Got it, Liam. We're with you." Liam looked out at the horizon, the sun just beginning to set, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, a reminder of what they were fighting for. This planet, this people, they were worth defending, worth proving to the galaxy that humanity was capable of more than anyone had ever dreamed. As the team dispersed, Liam lingered by the vessel, his hand resting on its surface. The journey into the 7th dimension had changed him. He had seen things, felt things, that no one else could ever truly understand. But that was okay. It wasn't about him. It was about all of them, about humanity stepping into the unknown together. The calm crackled to life, and Grace's voice came through, steady and reassuring. "Liam, I've found something. A signal. It's faint, but it's there. Could be the renegades." Liam felt his heart lift, a sense of hope welling inside him. He climbed back into the cockpit, the controls lighting up under his touch. This wasn't over. Far from it. The battle had just begun, and he knew that humanity would rise to the challenge, no matter what lay ahead. "Transmit our response, Grace," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "Tell them we're ready. Whatever happens next, we're not backing down." And with that, the vessel lifted from the landing site, the ground falling away beneath it as Liam guided it toward the source of the signal, toward the future that awaited them. Humanity had proven itself, but now came the real test, showing the galaxy that they weren't just capable of greatness, but that they could shape the very future of the universe itself.